July 6, 1992, a body is found and pulled from the Hudson River near Christopher Street in West Village, Greenwich, New York City. The victim is identified as 46-year-old Marsha P. Johnson of the West Village. News of her death quickly spreads and sends a shockwave across the nation. Who was she? Why did Marsha's death carry so much weight? Marsha was an African-American transgender woman, veteran of the Stonewall Uprising, and LGBTQ equivalent to Dr. Martin Luther King. Born Malcolm Michaels Jr. on August 24, 1945, in Elizabeth, New Jersey. She had a difficult childhood. From an early age, she began cross-dressing until she was found out and reprimanded. Later, after graduating high school, she moved to Greenwich, found her footing when she came out, and later became what was known as a drag mother or drag queen who helped the homeless and LGBTQ youth. She advocated for LGBTQ rights, for the rights of transgender women of color, and for racial equality. She loved everyone, always giving things away. From food to clothing to a place to stay, if anyone was in need, she was always there, like a good neighbor. Her outfits, just like her wild nature, were always unpredictable and never quiet in tone. From plumes to wild dresses, there was no telling what would come out of her closet, and she never repeated the same thing twice. Also true to her wild nature, when asked about her middle initial, P, she would only reply, "Pay it no mind." On June 28, 1969, at the Stonewall Inn on Christopher Street, the hub of the New York City gay community in the 1960s, things turned violent after a few LGBTQ people were arrested on questionable charges, handcuffed, and very publicly forced into police cars on the streets. It became an LGBTQ watershed moment. The uprising that ensued was spearheaded by none other than Marsha Johnson herself. Despite the transgender community, being pushed away from the rest of the LGBTQ community in favor of promoting white cisgender men and women to lead the cause for gay rights, Marsha along with her friend and fellow activist Sylvia Rivera, still stood for all of LGBTQ rights and for racial equality, and created STAR, the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, later to be defined as Street Transgender Action Revolutionaries, which provided services to the homeless LGBTQ people in the community, from food to clothing to shelter, all in accordance with Marsha's loving nature. Throughout her life, Marsha kept pushing and fighting fiercely. And even if one was sick with AIDS or another disease, she would stand next to them and treat them like family and care for them as if they were anyone else. In 1992, Marsha was last seen at 4:30 a.m. on July 5th, frantic, seemingly followed by two men who were never identified, after having been considered missing for a couple of days prior. The next day, her body was found by apparent drowning. It was ruled a suicide, and it seemed as though it was a police cover-up due to strong possibilities of a mob hit, thanks to evidence of a car, a suspicious vehicle, the night of her initial disappearance, and a record of a phone call in which a threat was made that referenced her death as being intentional. Despite the circumstances of her death, which still remain unsolved to this day, Marsha's example and her life have paved the way for many to stand in her place and continue the fight for racial and LGBTQ equality. Today's struggles remind us of her life and what it means for us. Her fight is not yet over and is in fact very much an active battle. With recent riots and protests over the deaths of African American men and women at the hands of corrupt police, LGBTQ rights are also still at the forefront. And it is the transgender woman of color who's the most likely among the LGBTQ communities to be murdered on the basis of race and gender identity. Her fight is not over. Who she was still lives today,